The smell of whiskey and desperation hung thick in the air the day Tabitha Crawford watched her own mother shake hands with a stranger over the price of her daughter's life. She was 18 years old, standing in the dusty street of Fort Stockton, Texas in 1878, and she had known for years that this moment would come. Her mother, Margaret Crawford, was a woman hollowed out by grief and addiction, a shell of whoever she might have been before Tabitha's father died in a mining accident 7 years prior. But knowing it would happen did not make it hurt any less when Margaret held out her trembling hand and accepted a silver dollar and a bottle of rot-gut whiskey from the saloon owner, Samuel Briggs. "She is strong," Margaret said, her voice raspy and broken. "She can clean, cook, work all day without complaint. You will get your money's worth." Tabitha stood frozen, her worn calico dress hanging loose on her thin frame, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid that had come undone in places. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there like livestock being appraised. But where would she go? They had nothing. For weeks, they had been living in a lean-to behind the mercantile, surviving on scraps and charity that was running thinner by the day. Margaret had promised things would get better, that she would find work, that they would manage somehow. But the promise of alcohol always won out over the promise of a better tomorrow. Samuel Briggs was a thick man with small eyes and hands that looked like slabs of meat. He ran the Lucky Dollar Saloon and had a reputation for working his girls until they broke. Tabitha knew what awaited her there, knew that cleaning floors would only be the beginning of what he would demand. She felt her throat tighten as he reached out to take her arm, his fingers closing around her wrist like a manacle. "Come on then, girl," Briggs said. "You got tables to wipe before the evening crowd comes in." Tabitha looked back at her mother one last time. Margaret would not meet her eyes. She was already uncorking the bottle, her entire focus on the amber liquid inside. Something inside Tabitha's chest cracked and broke, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never see her mother again. She did not want to. "Wait!" The voice cut through the late afternoon air like a knife. It was low and steady, with an edge of authority that made even Briggs pause. Tabitha turned to see a man stepping out from the shadow of the general store. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the easy, dangerous grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. He wore dusty brown trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a black hat pulled low over his eyes. A gun belt hung at his hip, the holster worn smooth from use. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. "This is not your concern, Ashton," Briggs said, his voice taking on a warning tone. "Business transaction, all legal and proper." The cowboy, Ashton, walked closer with measured steps. His boots kicked up small puffs of dust with each stride. When he stopped, he was close enough that Tabitha could see the intensity in his gray eyes, the way they flicked from Briggs to Margaret to her, assessing the situation with rapid precision. "How much?" Ashton asked, his gaze settling on Tabitha's face. "Already paid for," Briggs said, tightening his grip on Tabitha's wrist until she gasped. "She is mine now." I asked how much. Ashton's voice had gone quieter, which somehow made it more menacing. His hand rested casually near his gun, not threatening, just present. A reminder. Briggs hesitated. Everyone in Fort Stockton knew Ashton Ellis. He was a ranch hand at the Triple Bar spread just outside town, known for being fair but hard, the kind of man who kept his word and expected others to do the same. He was also known for being quick with a gun when the situation called for it, though he had never drawn on anyone without cause. Briggs was a bully, but he was not stupid enough to push a man like Ashton too far. $1 and a bottle," Margaret spoke up suddenly, swaying slightly on her feet. She looked at Ashton with bloodshot eyes. "But he already paid, so she is his now. Deal is done." Ashton reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. He counted them out deliberately, then added several bills from his wallet. When he held out his hand, it contained more money than Tabitha had seen in months. $50, Ashton said. "For the girl. You take that and walk away, Briggs. The woman can keep what you already gave her. $50 was a fortune. It was more than a month's wages for most men. Tabitha stared at the money, then at Ashton, trying to understand what was happening. Why would a stranger offer so much for her? What did he want? Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear and confusion warring inside her chest. Briggs stared at the money, his small eyes calculating. Greed warred with pride on his fleshy face. Finally, greed won. He released Tabitha's wrist and snatched the money from Ashton's hand, counting it twice before stuffing it into his vest pocket. "Fine," Briggs growled. "But you are a damn fool, Ellis. That is too much money for a scrawny thing like her." Ashton did not respond. He simply turned to Tabitha and held out his hand, palm up, an offering rather than a command. She looked at that hand, calloused and strong, and then up at his face. There was something in his expression that she could not quite read. Not pity exactly, not lust either, which was what she had expected. It was something gentler, something that looked almost like understanding. "You are worth more than that," Ashton said quietly. The words meant only for her. "A whole lot more." Tabitha felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry, not here, not in front of her mother and Briggs and the handful of townspeople who had stopped to watch the spectacle. She had spent years learning to swallow her tears, to push down her pain until it lived somewhere deep and silent inside her. She was not about to break now. She took Ashton's hand. His grip was warm and steady, and when he gently tugged her away from Briggs, she followed without looking back. They walked in silence down the main street of Fort Stockton. The town was not large, just a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a dusty central road. There was the saloon, the general store, a blacksmith, a church, a hotel, and the land office. Beyond that, a scattering of houses gave way to open desert, miles and miles of scrubland dotted with mesquite and yucca. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ashton led her to the livery stable, where a beautiful chestnut mare waited, already saddled. He untied the reins and turned to Tabitha. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Not well," she admitted. She had ridden a few times as a child before her father died, but never much. Horses were expensive, and they had not been able to afford one. "That is all right. We will go slow." He helped her up onto the horse, his hands respectful and careful, then swung up behind her. Tabitha stiffened at the proximity, at the feeling of his chest against her back, but Ashton kept a polite distance, his arms coming around her only to hold the reins. "Where are we going?" she asked as they started moving. "My place," he said. "I have a small cabin on the edge of the Triple Bar Ranch. You will be safe there." "Why did you do that?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why did you pay for me?" Ashton was quiet for a long moment. The only sounds were the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the whisper of wind through the dry grass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "About 2 years ago, I watched my sister get sold to a man who promised to marry her," he said. "She was 16. My father owed money he could not pay, and the man who held the debt said he would forgive it all if my father gave him Mary. My father agreed without even asking her. That man took Mary to California, and I have not heard from her since. I wrote letters, tried to find out where she was, but nothing ever came back. I do not know if she is alive or dead, happy or suffering, and I have to live with the fact that I did not stop it. I was only 18 myself, did not have any money or power, and I told myself there was nothing I could do. But I should have done something. Anything." He paused, and Tabitha felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. "When I saw your mother trading you for whiskey, I knew I could not walk away again," he continued. "Maybe I cannot save my sister, but I could save you. So I did." Tabitha sat very still, absorbing his words. She had expected him to want something from her, to have bought her for his own purposes. But this was different. This was a man trying to make amends for a past he could not change. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing at all, just leaned back slightly, allowing herself to trust his presence at her back. The Triple Bar Ranch came into view as the sun touched the horizon. It was a sprawling operation with a main house, bunkhouse, barn, corrals, and several other outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape, dark shapes against the golden grass. Ashton guided the mare past the main cluster of buildings, following a narrow trail that led to a small cabin nestled against a rocky outcropping. It was simple but well built, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. "This is where I live," Ashton said, dismounting and then helping Tabitha down. "The ranch owner, Mr. Donovan, lets me stay here in exchange for work. I have been here 3 years now, saving my money." He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Tabitha stepped inside cautiously. The cabin was one large room with a stone fireplace, a simple bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, a trunk, and some shelves. It was clean and spare, the home of a man who owned little but took care of what he had. "I know it is not much," Ashton said, following her inside. "But it is warm and dry, and you will be safe here." "Where will you sleep?" Tabitha asked, eyeing the single bed. "I will bed down in the barn," he said. "You take the cabin. In the morning, we will figure out what comes next." "You do not have to do that," she said quickly. "This is your home. I can sleep in the barn." "No." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You have been through enough today. You take the bed. I will be fine." He moved around the cabin, lighting a lamp and starting a fire in the fireplace. Then he pulled some food from a cupboard, bread and cheese and dried meat, and set it on the table. "Eat," he said. "You look half-starved." Tabitha realized she was starving. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. She sat at the table and ate slowly, trying not to wolf down the food even though her stomach screamed for more. Ashton sat across from her, not eating himself, just watching her with those steady gray eyes. "What is your name?" he asked. "Tabitha Crawford," she said. "But most people call me Tabby." "I am Ashton Ellis," he said, though she already knew. "I am pleased to meet you, Tabitha." The formality of it, the simple courtesy, made her throat tighten again. When was the last time someone had been pleased to meet her? When was the last time anyone had treated her like a person rather than a burden? "Thank you," she whispered, "for what you did today. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything," Ashton said. "You did not ask to be sold. You did not deserve any of this. I did what any decent person should do." But Tabitha knew better. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people had looked the other way for years while her mother drank away their lives, while they slowly lost everything, while Tabitha grew thin and ragged from trying to hold it all together. Ashton Ellis was not like most people. After she finished eating, Ashton showed her where the water was, gave her a clean shirt to sleep in, and then bid her good night. He took a blanket and headed out the door, leaving Tabitha alone in the cabin. She stood in the middle of the room, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had woken up in a lean-to with no hope and no future. Tonight, she was standing in a warm cabin with a full stomach and a man who had paid $50 simply to keep her safe. She changed into the shirt he had given her, rolled up the sleeves, and climbed into the bed. It was the first real bed she had slept in for months. The mattress was stuffed with corn husks and covered with a faded quilt. It smelled like wood smoke and sage. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and stared at the ceiling, watching the firelight dance across the rough wooden beams. For the first time in years, Tabitha Crawford felt something she had almost forgotten, the fragile, tentative stirring of hope. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory flooded back, and she sat up quickly, pushing her hair out of her face. Morning light streamed through the small window, bright and clear. The door opened, and Ashton stepped inside, carrying a steaming pot of coffee. He had shaved and changed his shirt, and his dark hair was damp as if he had washed at the pump. He looked at her and stopped. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have knocked. I was not thinking." "It is all right," Tabitha said, suddenly very aware that she was wearing only his shirt, which hung to her knees. "I should be up already. I did not mean to sleep so late." "You needed the rest," Ashton said. He set the coffee pot on the table. "I brought some eggs and biscuits from the main house. Mrs. Donovan sent them. She is the ranch owner's wife. I told her I had a friend staying with me." Tabitha wrapped the blanket around herself and got up, moving to the table. Ashton served the food, and they ate together in a silence that was not quite comfortable, but not entirely awkward either. Tabitha could feel questions building between them, could sense that they needed to talk about what happened next. "I have been thinking," Ashton said finally, setting down his fork. "You cannot stay here long term without people talking. This is a small community, and reputation matters, especially for a young woman." Tabitha's heart sank. Of course. He had saved her, but he did not want her here permanently. She was a complication, a problem he had taken on in a moment of conscience, but now regretted. She should have known. "I understand," she said quietly. "I can leave today. I will find something." "No," Ashton said quickly. "That is not what I mean. I am not sending you away. I just mean we need to figure out a proper arrangement, something that protects you." "What kind of arrangement?" she asked, confused. Ashton ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "There are a few options. You could work at the ranch house. Mrs. Donovan is always looking for help, and she is a good woman. Fair. Or I could help you get a position in town, maybe at the hotel or the mercantile. Something respectable. And if I want to stay here?" The words came out before Tabitha could stop them. She barely knew this man, but something about him made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. The thought of leaving, of going back into town where everyone would know what her mother had done, where she would have to endure the stares and whispers, made her stomach churn with dread. Ashton met her eyes, and she saw surprise there, and something else, something that looked like relief. "If you want to stay," he said slowly, "then we would need to make it official. We would need to get married." Tabitha nearly choked on her coffee. "Married?" "It is the only way people would accept you living here," Ashton said. "Otherwise, they would assume things. They would talk. It would ruin your reputation completely, and mine along with it. But if we were married, it would be proper. Legal. But we do not know each other," Tabitha said, her mind reeling. "You cannot possibly want to marry me." "It does not have to be a real marriage," Ashton said. "Not in the way that matters. We could have separate rooms once I build an addition onto the cabin. We would be married in name only, just to protect you, to give you a place to belong." Tabitha stared at him, trying to understand. A marriage of convenience, a way to give her safety and respectability without demanding anything from her. It was an extraordinary offer, and she did not know what to make of it. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You already paid $50 for me. Why would you give up your freedom too?" Ashton was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "I am not giving up anything I was using," he said finally. "I have no plans to court anyone. I work, I save money, I send what I can to my mother back in Missouri. That is my life. Adding a wife, even in name only, does not change much. But for you, it changes everything. It gives you a home, a name, protection, a chance to start over." Tabitha's throat felt tight. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was too much, that he was sacrificing too much. But the truth was, she had no other options. She could try to find work in town, but everyone would know she was the girl whose mother sold her for a bottle. She would be shunned or worse, seen as easy prey for men like Briggs. Working at the ranch house would be better, but she would still be alone, still vulnerable. Marriage to Ashton, even a marriage in name only, would give her something she had not had in years: security. "All right," she said quietly. "If you are sure, then yes, I will marry you." Ashton nodded, and she saw relief flash across his face. "We will go into town this afternoon and speak to the preacher. We can get married tomorrow if he is available. I will talk to Mr. Donovan and explain the situation. He is a good man. He will understand." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Ashton left to do his work on the ranch, and Tabitha cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, needing something to do with her hands, needing to feel useful. She found a broom and swept the floor, washed the dishes, aired out the blankets. It was soothing in a way to do these simple tasks, to feel like she belonged somewhere, even if that belonging was temporary and fragile. In the afternoon, Ashton returned, and they rode back into Fort Stockton together. Tabitha wore the same calico dress from the day before, but she had washed her face and braided her hair more neatly. She held her head high as they rode down the main street, even though she could feel people staring. The church was a small white building at the end of the street, with a wooden cross mounted above the door. The preacher, Reverend Thomas, was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened as Ashton explained the situation, leaving out the details of how they had met, but making it clear that they wanted to marry quickly. "I see," Reverend Thomas said, looking between them. "And you are both certain about this? Marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly." "We are certain," Ashton said firmly. Reverend Thomas looked at Tabitha. "Child, are you doing this of your own free will? No one is forcing you?" Tabitha thought about that question. Was anyone forcing her? Not in the way the Reverend meant. Ashton had made it clear she had other options. But circumstances were forcing her, the circumstances of being a woman alone in a hard world with no money and no family. Still, of all the choices available to her, this one felt the most like her own. "Yes," she said. "I want to marry him." The Reverend studied her face for a moment longer, then nodded. "Very well. I can perform the ceremony tomorrow morning. After the regular service, you will need 2 witnesses." "I will arrange that," Ashton said. They left the church and rode back to the ranch in silence. Tabitha's mind was spinning. Tomorrow she would be married, to a man she had met only yesterday. A man who had saved her, yes, but whom she did not know at all. What had she agreed to? What kind of life was she stepping into? That night, Ashton slept in the barn again, and Tabitha lay awake in the cabin, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But what choice did she have? And more importantly, when she thought about Ashton Ellis with his steady eyes and quiet strength, she did not feel afraid. She felt something else, something she could not quite name, something that might, in time, become trust. The wedding took place the next morning in the small church, with Mr. and Mrs. Donovan standing as witnesses. Mrs. Donovan was a plump, kind-faced woman in her 50s who had brought a bouquet of wildflowers for Tabitha to hold. Mr. Donovan was a tall, weathered man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook Ashton's hand firmly and told him he was doing a good thing. Tabitha wore the same calico dress, but Mrs. Donovan had lent her a shawl of soft blue wool that made her feel less shabby. She stood beside Ashton in front of the Reverend and listened as he recited the marriage vows. When it came time for Ashton to say, "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When it was her turn, Tabitha's voice wavered, but she got the words out. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thomas said. "You may kiss your bride." Ashton hesitated, then leaned in and pressed a quick, chaste kiss to Tabitha's cheek. It was over in a second, nothing more than a formality. But Tabitha felt heat rise in her face anyway. They signed the marriage register, and just like that, Tabitha Crawford became Tabitha Ellis. She had a new name, a new life, and a husband who was still essentially a stranger. Mrs. Donovan insisted they come to the ranch house for a wedding meal. She had prepared fried chicken, biscuits, gravy, green beans, and apple pie. It was the finest meal Tabitha had eaten in years, and she tried to savor every bite even though her stomach was in knots. The Donovans were warm and welcoming, treating her like family, and that made it both better and worse. She did not deserve this kindness. She was the daughter of a drunk who sold her for whiskey. She was nothing, nobody. But Ashton treated her with quiet respect, and when Mr. Donovan toasted their happiness, Ashton raised his glass and smiled at her, and something inside Tabitha's chest loosened just a little. After the meal, they returned to the cabin. Ashton had brought his things back from the barn, and they stood awkwardly in the middle of the small space, both suddenly aware that they were now living together, married, expected to share a life. "I will start building the addition tomorrow," Ashton said. "It will take a few weeks, but I will work on it every evening and on Sundays. In the meantime, I will take the floor. You keep the bed." "Ashton, you cannot sleep on the floor for weeks," Tabitha protested. "This is your home. I should be the one on the floor." "We are not having this argument," Ashton said, but his tone was gentle. "You are my wife now, even if it is just in name. That means I take care of you. And the first part of taking care of you is making sure you have a decent place to sleep." Tabitha wanted to argue more, but she could see the determination in his face. This was important to him, this idea of protecting her, of doing right by her. So she nodded and let it go. The days fell into a pattern. Ashton woke before dawn and went to work on the ranch, herding cattle, mending fences, doing whatever Mr. Donovan needed. Tabitha spent her days cleaning the cabin, washing clothes at the pump, and preparing simple meals. Mrs. Donovan sent over food occasionally and taught Tabitha how to bake bread and make stew. In the evenings, Ashton worked on the addition to the cabin, hammering and sawing until the light failed. Then they would eat together, talking quietly about the day, slowly learning about each other. Tabitha learned that Ashton had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the oldest of 4 children. He had left home at 17 to find work out west, sending money back to his family whenever he could. He had worked on ranches in Kansas and Colorado before settling at the Triple Bar 3 years ago. He was 25 years old, steady and hardworking, with a deep sense of responsibility and a quiet kindness that showed itself in small ways. Ashton learned that Tabitha had spent most of her childhood in mining camps, following her father from claim to claim. Her mother had been different then, happy and full of laughter. But when Tabitha's father died, crushed in a cave-in, something in Margaret had died too. They had drifted for years, moving from town to town, Margaret drinking more and more, until finally they ended up in Fort Stockton with nothing left. Tabitha had tried to hold things together, taking any work she could find, but it was never enough. Her mother's need for alcohol always consumed whatever small amount they managed to scrape together. As the weeks passed, Tabitha began to feel less like a guest and more like she belonged. She started a small garden behind the cabin, planting vegetables that Mrs. Donovan gave her. She mended Ashton's clothes and learned to cook better. She even began to smile occasionally, small flashes of lightness that surprised them both. Ashton was true to his word. He treated her with unfailing respect, never demanding anything from her, never making her feel like she owed him. But Tabitha noticed other things too. The way his eyes lingered on her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. The way his hand would brush hers when he passed her something, and how he would pull back quickly as if burned. The careful distance he maintained, as if afraid to come too close. And Tabitha noticed her own reactions too. The way her heart would speed up when she heard his footsteps on the porch at the end of the day. The way she had started to care about small things, like making sure his favorite foods were on the table, or that his shirts were mended neatly. The way she found herself watching him work, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the sureness of his movements. It confused her, these feelings. This was supposed to be a marriage in name only, a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way it had started to feel like more, and that terrified her. 2 months after the wedding, on a warm evening in late summer, everything changed. Tabitha was washing dishes at the basin when Ashton came in from working on the addition. He was covered in sawdust, his shirt damp with sweat. He looked tired but satisfied. "It is almost done," he said. "Another few days, and you will have your own room. A real door and everything." "Thank you," Tabitha said. "You have worked so hard on it." "It is no trouble," Ashton said. He poured himself a cup of water from the pitcher and drank deeply. Then he set the cup down and looked at her, really looked at her, and Tabitha felt something shift in the air between them. "Tabitha," he said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, drying her hands on a towel. "Are you happy here?" he asked. "I mean, truly happy, or are you just making the best of a bad situation?" The question caught her off guard. She turned to face him fully, studying his face. He looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way she had not seen before. "I am happy," she said honestly. "Happier than I have been in a long time. You have given me a home, Ashton. You have given me a life. I did not think I would ever have that." "But is it enough?" he pressed. "Is this arrangement enough for you? A marriage in name only? Because I need to know, Tabitha. I need to know if you are content with things as they are, or if you want something different." Tabitha's heart was pounding. She knew what he was asking, could hear the deeper question beneath his words. She should tell him she was content with the arrangement, should keep the safe distance they had maintained. But the truth was, she was not content anymore. Somewhere in the last 2 months, she had started to fall in love with her husband, with his quiet strength and his gentle kindness, with the way he treated her like she mattered, like she was worth something. And the thought of spending the rest of her life sleeping in a separate room, maintaining a polite distance, made her ache with loneliness. "I want more," she whispered. "I want this to be a real marriage. If you do." The relief that flooded Ashton's face was answer enough. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I have wanted that since the day I married you," he said roughly. "But I did not want to push you, did not want you to feel like you owed me anything. I wanted you to choose me, Tabitha. Not because I bought your freedom, but because you wanted to." "I choose you," Tabitha said, and then his mouth was on hers, and she was kissing him back with all the pent-up longing of the last 2 months. His lips were warm and firm, his hands gentle as they moved to her waist, pulling her close. Tabitha wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeper, tasting dust and sweat and something that was purely Ashton. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ashton rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing in that street, looking so fierce and frightened all at once. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Tabitha Ellis, and I am the luckiest man alive that you are my wife." Tears spilled down Tabitha's cheeks, but for once they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you too," she said. "I did not think I could love anyone after everything that happened, but you showed me that I could, that I was worth loving." They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, and Tabitha felt like she had finally come home, not just to a place, but to a person, to a man who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to lift her up, to a man who had given her everything and asked for nothing in return. That night they did not sleep in separate spaces. Ashton carried Tabitha to the bed and laid her down gently, and they came together as husband and wife in truth, not just in name. It was tender and sweet, and a little awkward, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. In the morning, Tabitha woke to find Ashton watching her, a soft smile on his face. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of gold. "Good morning, wife," he said. "Good morning, husband," she replied, and leaned in to kiss him again. The addition to the cabin was completed, but instead of making it a separate bedroom, they turned it into a sitting room and workspace. They did not need separate rooms anymore. They shared the bed every night, curled together, and Tabitha marveled at how natural it felt, how right. Life settled into a new rhythm. Tabitha was no longer just keeping house. She was building a home with the man she loved. She grew confident in her cooking, in her gardening, in her place on the ranch. The other ranch hands accepted her, and the few women in the area began to include her in their gatherings. She was no longer the girl whose mother sold her. She was Mrs. Ellis, Ashton's wife, and she held her head high. Ashton thrived too, knowing he had someone to come home to, someone who loved him and believed in him, made him work harder and dream bigger. He talked about saving enough money to buy their own piece of land someday, to start a small ranch of their own. Tabitha encouraged him, helped him plan, and together they started putting away every spare penny. The first winter they spent as a true married couple was hard in some ways. The Texas wind could be bitter, and money was always tight, but they faced it together, keeping each other warm, supporting each other through the lean times. And when spring came again, bringing warmth and new life, Tabitha discovered she was carrying a child. She was terrified to tell Ashton. They had not planned for a baby, and she worried that he would be upset, that it would derail their plans to save money. But when she finally gathered the courage to tell him on a warm April evening while they sat on the porch watching the sunset, his reaction was nothing like she feared. "A baby?" he said, his voice full of wonder. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Tabitha said. "Are you happy about it? I know we were trying to save money, and a baby will make things harder." "Happy?" Ashton laughed, and there were tears in his eyes. "Tabitha, I am beyond happy. I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents. This is everything I ever wanted and did not dare to hope for." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and Tabitha felt all her fears melt away. They would manage. They always did. And now they would have a child, a small person who was a piece of both of them, a symbol of their love and their future. The pregnancy was not easy. Tabitha was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Ashton fussed over her constantly, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, rubbing her back when she was ill. Mrs. Donovan checked on her regularly, offering advice and encouragement. The other women in the area rallied around her, bringing baby clothes and blankets, sharing their own experiences. As her belly grew, Tabitha felt a fierce protective love for the child growing inside her. This baby would never know hunger or neglect. This baby would never feel unwanted or unloved. She and Ashton would make sure of that. The baby came in late November, during a cold snap that had everyone huddled indoors. Tabitha's labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Ashton paced outside the cabin, frantic with worry, while Mrs. Donovan and two other ranch wives attended to Tabitha. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Ashton burst into the cabin before anyone could stop him. "Is she all right?" he demanded. "Is Tabitha all right?" "She is fine," Mrs. Donovan said, smiling. "And you have a son, a healthy, loud son." Ashton's face transformed with joy. He moved to the bed where Tabitha lay, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tired, happy eyes. "Meet your son," she said softly. Ashton reached out with trembling hands and took the baby carefully, cradling him like he was made of glass. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at Ashton with dark, unfocused eyes. Ashton stared down at his son, and Tabitha saw his face crumple with emotion. "Hello, little man," Ashton whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making sure you are safe and loved and happy." You will never doubt that you are wanted." Tabitha felt tears stream down her face. She knew Ashton was thinking of his sister, of the promise he had made to himself to never let another person under his care feel abandoned. Their son would never know that pain. They named him Andrew, after Ashton's father. Andrew Ellis came into the world on November 23rd, 1879, and from the moment he arrived, he was the center of their universe. Ashton was a devoted father, coming home every evening eager to hold his son, to help with feedings and changings, to simply watch him sleep. Tabitha had never imagined that a man could be so tender with a baby, but Ashton took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. The first year of Andrew's life was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. There were sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, teething and colic, and all the normal challenges of a new baby. But there was also the first smile, the first laugh, the first word. Every milestone was a celebration, a reminder of the family they had built from nothing. During that year, something else happened too. Tabitha received a letter. It came to the ranch, addressed to Mrs. Tabitha Ellis, and when she opened it, she found a single page with a few lines written in a shaky hand. "Tabby, I heard you got married and had a baby. I am glad you are doing well. I am in a place for people like me now, trying to get sober. I know I can never make up for what I did. I just wanted to say I am sorry. Your mother, Margaret." Tabitha stared at the letter for a long time. She felt a complicated tangle of emotions: anger, hurt, sadness, and underneath it all, a small flicker of hope. Her mother was trying to get sober. It was too late to fix what had been broken between them, but maybe it was not too late for Margaret to find some kind of peace. Tabitha showed the letter to Ashton that evening. He read it carefully, then looked at her. "How do you feel about this?" he asked. "I do not know," Tabitha admitted. "Part of me wants to write back, to tell her about Andrew, about our life. Part of me wants to tear it up and forget I ever received it. She hurt me so badly, Ashton. She sold me. How do I forgive that?" "I do not know if you can," Ashton said honestly, "and I do not think you have to. Forgiveness is not something you owe her. But maybe you can find a way to let go of the anger, not for her sake, but for yours. Carrying that hurt around is a heavy burden." Tabitha thought about his words for days. Finally, she wrote back a brief letter. She told her mother that she was married to a good man, that they had a son, that she was building a life. She did not say she forgave her because she did not really. But she wished her mother well in her recovery, and she said that maybe someday, when enough time had passed, they could write to each other again. It was not reconciliation, but it was a first step toward letting go of the past, and that felt like enough. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. Andrew was 2 when Tabitha became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Annie. She had Ashton's gray eyes and Tabitha's dark hair, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was rambunctious. Ashton was over the moon to have a daughter. He doted on Annie, carrying her everywhere, singing to her in his rough but tender voice. Andrew, for his part, took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help with the baby, to show her his toys, to protect her from any perceived threat. Watching Ashton with their children, seeing the love and devotion he poured into being a father, made Tabitha fall in love with him all over again, deeper and more completely than she had thought possible. He was everything a man should be: strong but gentle, hardworking but always making time for his family, devoted and faithful and true. By 1884, Ashton and Tabitha had saved enough money to buy a small piece of land about 5 miles from the Triple Bar Ranch. It was not much, just 60 acres with a creek running through it, but it was theirs. They built a small house, larger than the cabin but still modest, with 2 bedrooms and a real kitchen. Ashton started running his own cattle, and Tabitha kept chickens and expanded her garden. It was hard work, building a ranch from the ground up. There were days when the sun beat down mercilessly, and the work seemed endless. There were droughts that killed their crops and storms that scattered their cattle. There were lean years when they ate beans and cornbread for months on end, but they had each other and they had their children, and that made everything bearable. Andrew grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working alongside his father. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, and by the time he was 6, he was helping with the cattle. Annie was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of reading that Tabitha encouraged. She would sit on the porch with a book for hours, lost in stories of faraway places. In 1886, Tabitha gave birth to another son, whom they named Aaron. He was a surprise, coming 5 years after Annie, and he kept them on their toes with his endless energy and mischief. Ashton joked that Aaron had enough spirit for 3 children, and Tabitha could not argue with that. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Ashton proved to have a good head for business, and their small operation slowly expanded. They never became wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. They had built something real and lasting, a legacy for their children. One evening in the summer of 1890, Tabitha and Ashton sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over their land. Andrew was now 11, Annie was 8, and Aaron was 4. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the warm evening air. Tabitha leaned against Ashton's shoulder, feeling content and at peace. "Do you ever think about that day in Fort Stockton?" Ashton asked quietly. "The day I met you?" "Sometimes," Tabitha said. "It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else." "You were so scared," Ashton said, "but you were trying so hard not to show it. You looked like you wanted to fight the whole world." "I felt like I had to," Tabitha said. "Like, if I let my guard down for even a second, I would shatter." "And now?" Ashton asked, tightening his arm around her. "Now I feel safe," Tabitha said simply. "You gave me that. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me love and children and a home. You showed me that I was worth more than a bottle and a coin. You showed me I was worth everything." Ashton turned to look at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "You saved me too, you know," he said. "I was just going through the motions before I met you. Working, saving money, sending it home to my family, but not really living. You gave me a reason to build something, to dream bigger. You and our children, you are everything to me." Tabitha reached up and kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of 12 years of love and partnership. When they pulled apart, they sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. They faced droughts and floods, sickness and injury, the everyday struggles of ranching life. But they faced it all together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. Andrew grew into a young man, much like his father, steady, hardworking, with a strong moral compass. He started courting a girl from town when he was 18, a sweet young woman named Sarah who fit into their family seamlessly. They married when Andrew was 20, and 2 years later made Ashton and Tabitha grandparents for the first time with the birth of a little girl. Annie surprised them all by wanting to go to school. She had a quick mind and a hunger for learning that could not be satisfied with the basic education available in Fort Stockton. With their blessing and what money they could spare, she went to live with Ashton's mother in Missouri to attend a teaching college. She wrote long letters home, full of excitement about her studies and her plans to open a school for girls in Texas when she finished. Aaron, true to his energetic nature, decided ranching was too tame for him. At 17, he signed on with a cattle drive, heading north to Kansas. It nearly broke Tabitha's heart to see him go, but she knew he needed to find his own way, just as she had found hers all those years ago. Through it all, Ashton and Tabitha remained each other's constant. They still sat on the porch together most evenings, talking about the day, making plans, simply enjoying each other's company. After more than 20 years of marriage, they still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other goodnight, still said, "I love you," every single day. In 1898, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Tabitha and Ashton celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch, along with friends from town and neighboring ranches. There was food and music and dancing, and as the sun set, Ashton pulled Tabitha into his arms for a slow dance in the yard. 20 years, he said, smiling down at her. The best 20 years of my life. Mine too, Tabitha said. She looked around at the gathering, at the home they had built, at the family they had raised, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have all of this. You deserve it, Ashton said firmly. You deserve every bit of happiness you have found. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I thank God every day that I was in Fort Stockton that afternoon, that I had the courage to say those words to you. What words? Tabitha asked, though she knew. You are worth more than that, Ashton said, repeating what he had told her all those years ago. You were worth more than a bottle and a coin. You were worth $50 and all my tomorrows and every beat of my heart. You are worth everything, Tabitha, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you. Tabitha felt tears slip down her cheeks as she pulled her husband close and held him tight. Around them, their family and friends celebrated, but in that moment it was just the two of them, a cowboy and the girl he had saved who had somehow managed to save each other. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. But it was never told as a sad story, never as a tale of tragedy. Instead, it was told as a love story, as proof that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found, that sometimes a single act of kindness could change the course of a life. That love, real love, was worth fighting for. As the years advanced further into the new century, Tabitha and Ashton grew older together. Their hair turned gray. Their hands became gnarled with arthritis. Their steps slowed. But their love never dimmed. They still sat on the porch together, though now with grandchildren playing at their feet. They still held hands, their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. Andrew took over the daily running of the ranch, allowing Ashton to step back and enjoy his later years. Annie did open her school for girls, becoming a respected educator and a fierce advocate for women's education. Aaron eventually came home from his wandering, ready to settle down, and took up a position as a deputy sheriff in Fort Stockton. Tabitha never saw her mother again. Margaret died in 1895, sober for the last 3 years of her life. When Tabitha received the news, she felt sadness, but not the overwhelming grief she might have expected. She had made peace with her past, had let go of the anger that had once consumed her. She had built a life so full of love and joy that there was no room left for bitterness. On a warm spring day in 1905, Tabitha and Ashton sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. Ashton was 72 now, Tabitha 65. They had been married for 27 years, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. Do you have any regrets? Tabitha asked suddenly. Ashton thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. Not a single one, he said. What about you? Only that I did not have more years with you, Tabitha said. I wish I had met you when we were children. I wish I had a whole lifetime with you instead of just part of one. We have had more than many people get, Ashton said gently. And we have made the most of every moment. That is what matters. I love you, Ashton Ellis, Tabitha said. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too, Tabitha Ellis, Ashton replied. My wife, my partner, my everything. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this life with me. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and gold. Around them, the ranch settled into evening quiet. the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, the chirp of crickets beginning their nightly song. Tabitha thought back to that day in Fort Stockton when she had stood in the dusty street watching her mother trade her away, feeling like her life was ending. She thought about the cowboy who had stepped forward and said she was worth more. She thought about all the years since then, all the love and laughter and tears, all the ordinary moments that had added up to an extraordinary life. She had been traded for a bottle and a coin, but she had been worth so much more. A cowboy had seen that, had been willing to prove it, and together they had built something beautiful. A home, a family, a love that had lasted decades and would endure long after they were gone, passed down through the stories told to children and grandchildren. As darkness settled over the land, Tabitha leaned her head on Ashton's shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling utterly content. She had been saved by a good man with a kind heart, and in return, she had saved him right back. They had rescued each other from loneliness and built a life worth living. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, one by one, Tabitha knew with absolute certainty that she had been blessed beyond measure. The girl who had once been worth nothing more than a bottle and a coin had discovered she was worth everything. Their love story continued for many more years, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and commitment. Ashton and Tabitha grew old together on their ranch, surrounded by children and grandchildren, their love a beacon that guided their family for generations. They had proven that even from the darkest beginnings, the most beautiful love could bloom. That worth was not determined by circumstances, but by the choice to see and honor the value in another person. That sometimes all it took was one person brave enough to stand up and say, "You are worth more than that," to change the entire trajectory of a life. And when their time finally came, many years later, they went peacefully, having lived full and joyful lives, secure in the knowledge that they had loved well and been loved in return. Their story became part of the fabric of their family, a reminder that love could triumph over even the harshest circumstances, and that every person had immeasurable worth, whether anyone else could see it or not. The ranch they built remained in the family for generations, a physical reminder of what two people could create when they chose love, over convenience, commitment, over comfort. And on warm evenings, when the Texas sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of two voices on the porch talking softly about the day, the future, and the extraordinary life they had built together from the ashes of despair. In the end, theirs was a love story for the ages, not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real, because it was built on a foundation of respect and kindness and the unwavering belief that every person deserves to be valued. Because a cowboy had looked at a broken girl and seen not what she was, but what she could become. And because that girl had found the courage to believe him, to trust him, and to build a life alongside him that exceeded both their wildest dreams. The Ellis Ranch stood as a monument to their love long after they were gone, a reminder that from the worst moments can come the greatest blessings, that sometimes the person who saves you ends up being saved in return. That worth is intrinsic and immeasurable, and that love, true love, can heal even the deepest wounds and create beauty from brokenness. Their story was told and retold, passed down through generations, a family treasure more valuable than any amount of land or cattle. It was the story of how Tabitha Crawford became Tabitha Ellis, how a bottle and a coin became a lifetime of love, and how a single moment of courage and compassion changed the course of two lives forever. And in the hearts of all who heard it, the message remained clear and true. Every person has worth beyond measure, and sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to see it and speak it aloud to change everything. That was the gift Ashton had given Tabitha that day in Fort Stockton, and it was the gift they had given to their children, grandchildren, and all who came after, the gift of knowing, without question or doubt, that they were valued, loved, and worth more than they could possibly imagine.